I feel that I should add an addendum to what I said in the last video. While I was raised with a GameCube and PlayStation 2 during my childhood, probably one of the biggest consoles in my life was the Wii. Now that I've probably age-dated myself, which for an exact number lies somewhere between 50 stillborn metapsychoses and 10,000 flesh permutations, I should probably introduce the subject for today lest I incur the wrath of the Nimrods. Oh yeah, I didn't do that last video. Huh. Say what you will about the Wii, motion controls weren't the way of the future, but much like the PSP, the white monolith had a fantastic undercard of games supporting the top-tier releases. Muramasa the Demon Blade, Arc Rise Fantasia, Da Blob, the previously covered No More Heroes, plus the follow-up Desperate Struggle, the list goes on. Munchables falls into that category alongside being another release I played as a kid, one of the last rentals I ever remember renting. Back in my day and all that bothering that old codgers like me say, you youngins wouldn't understand. They were simpler times. My decision for choosing Munchables is another checkbox accusation, as my wearing psyche remembers the title and my enjoyment back then, so I wanted to see if my tastes have changed. Upholding that part of my brand is apparently I have a quota or something, and to give the illusion that my choice in topics isn't completely random. Or is it? It's not random. Well, mostly not random. This is going to be a case of me having to waffle a bit in this section, as the Munchables doesn't have a lot of documentation. It says a lot that one of the only articles I can get is the press announcement for the game's release, taken from IGN. Leading video games publisher and developer Namco Bandai Games America Incorporated today announced the Munchables, an entertaining romp into a colorful and delicious action-adventure for the Wii. Exploring rich and vibrant environments, players will devour delectable enemies as they guide their quirky heroes in the zany alien munching mashup filled with fun and addictive gameplay. The Munchables will chomp its way to stores this May. A further IGN article states that the game went gold before its American debut on May 26, 2009, where it saw release first, with Europe and Japan getting it later in the year. Due to the lack of information, as it is obvious that the Munchables is a budget title developed by Namco Bandai, I'll dive a little further into some of the people behind the game to give a clear picture on why the Munchables has the design it does. Starting first, the director of the game was Masatoshi Ogita. His first real step into the industry was as a planner for Dragon Valor on the PlayStation 1, a Namco-published, now production-developed RPG. Keep them in mind, now production, as the relationship with Namco is assumedly the reason why Ogita got folded into the company when it evolved into Bandai Namco. Now is the developer that helped ported Metro Cross to the NES, developed Splatterhouse 1 Pocket Graffiti, and has their hands tied in some of the Sonic games, Adventure DX and the Riders games. After one more stint at Now working as a planner for Goemon Shin Sedai Shimue, Ogita would officially join Namco in 2002 for Klonoa 2, Dream Champ tournament under Boss Operations. Perhaps because of his work there did he land the role of lead game designer for Katamari Damacy, a series that Ogita would work on until re-roll, as there hasn't been another release yet. You can probably see where this is going because Katamari holds a lot of influence over Munchables, as you will see later. Technical director Hiroyuki Yamado has somewhat the same background, working on the Katamari games and Bakugan Defenders of the Core, which Ogita also worked on. Likewise, my mentioning of one of the few Bakugan games infers the budget situation of the Munchables. In fact, much of the team that worked on the Katamari games and some of the other smaller Namco entries were a part of the Munchables team. At best, I can assume that this was essentially Namco letting some of their lower card talent produce a game for, well, reasons I can't say. This team is a literal who's who, as much of the people listed on the MobyGames credit page of the Munchables provides a lot of abeyance. So to cut to the chase, the version I played was the only one, the Wii release. As such, I booted up Dolphin, and instead of dealing with motion controls, I opted for the GameCube controller option, as the Munchables is one of a few Wii titles that supports traditional controller support. threadbare is the best this plot is. Our tale begins one day on the planet of Starveen, the local population, the eponymous Munchables, enjoying life until all the legendary orbs get taken away by the space pirate Don Onion, who uses their powers to create Tabemon, mostly food-based minions, and attempts to take over the planet. Standing in his way are two Munchables, Chomper and Munchie, and the Great Elder, who isn't native to the planet as he, like Don Onion, was a space pirate. Emphasis on was because once the Elder discovered that Don Onion was running cruel experiments to create Neo-Tabemon monsters, he left and became who he is today. And that's really it. The Munchables stop Don Onion, and pieces return to the land of Starveen. Outside of food puns, as there is a buffet of them in the game, the plot is basic and only exists to facilitate gameplay. Nothing wrong with that, but it does leave this tab quite bare bones. The Munchables is probably a game that is most endemic to the Wii. Compared to the likes of the PS Triple and Xbox 360, the Wii was the weakest out of the bunch. Thus, in place of going all out in the graphics department, games on the white monolith had to be heavily stylized to be able to stand out against the competitors. While I haven't mentioned it by word of mouth before, I've shown Mad World before during the No More Heroes video, and it's honestly one of the best looking titles on the Wii because of its heavy stylization. While the Munchables isn't in the same ballpark of Mad World, and honestly not a lot of games are, as Mad World is in my opinion a masterpiece in terms of visual flair, the leaning towards cartoony charm aids Munchables in a way that elevates it above a number of other games. Third time in a row, I'm a guy that enjoys when a game has, and because there's no better word, offbeat appeal. From the word go, the Munchables aims to please with a mixture of papercraft cutscenes that are decidedly cute and colorful worlds filled to the brim with adorable, if dangerous, enemies. It's kinda hard to hate a game where some of the most common foes include Superman carrots with dopey smiles, robotic sharks with pirate hats, tribal onions, and a whole smorgasbord of delightful Tabemon to eat. It helps that each world has a distinct theme that the knockoff fighting foodons played to, so while technically a lot of the monsters are palette swaps, as all the carrots have the same moveset, it doesn't feel as such. And honestly, I have a weakness for ditzy minions, like if I ever get to Kingdom Hearts, I'll gush about how much I like the more cutesy Heartless. To offset this, the bosses are a bit more menacing, or as much as they can be in this game. Hard to quake in fear when you're staring down a giant chocolate bar or personified onigiri. That said, some of the bosses aren't as interesting, like Broccoli and Mushroom Thriller, as they aren't as chaotic or inventive. You don't forget fighting a giant bunch of grapes is what I'm saying, but not to be outshone by the Tabemon. Our main quartet of Chomper, Munchie the Elder, and Robo, plus all the other NPC Munchables, have solid designs. They too play to the theme of the worlds, like with the skeleton head and the old man, and one thing that puts the playable characters above the others is that they grow and evolve during gameplay. It's akin to Katamari Damacy, which won't be the last time I bring that game up, as each level has you start off as a pipsqueak, only with you ending it as a giant sphere of bottomless hunger. The size and scale of this game is one of the highlights, as once you get big enough, you can either start skipping over level sections because you can jump over barricades, eat environmental objects like houses or boxes, or snap transitional objects because you're too big to use them. And while all three Munchables play the exact same, their evolved forms are different from one another, and that's not even including the cosmetic items you can give to your selected character for a bit more flair. What wraps around all of this are the solid animations and sound work. Tabemon generally bumble around, giving off the air that despite their credible threat, they're just as carefree as the Munchables, while the stars themselves don't have too much to animate as they are a literal mouth and that's it. Their cutscene animations provide a bit of cuteness when they aren't gobbling food wholesale. If a Tabemon is big enough when you eat it, or if it's a boss pirate, your selected Munchable will fling it into the air as a bit of show before snacking down. Underrated though is the music. A little tangent before I get to it, the voice work is decent most of the time the game text boxes at you. Keith Silverstein and Christopher Smith, maybe it's speculation as no one is credited, do a fine job, but what stands out is the music.
It appears that this is the end for me.
What in the world is going on here?
Till we meet again, Great Elder!
Hey, that's my house! What do you think you're doing? Come back here!
He'll never be able to catch me! Huh? Ah, where did you two come from? No!
You want to talk about an eclectic OST? Munchables hits you with a blend of broadly goofy compositions with weird samples that rivals the likes of Splatoon. Panic Restaurant, the boss theme, could easily slip into either or of the games, but that's not even counting how many genres this OST hits. From the smooth techno of Greenish Illusion, to the upbeat melodies of Starving Island, to the soft ballad that is Wonderful Ingredients, this is a gem of a listing and is the missing link belonging to the Splatoon family. All that is left to dissect is the sound effects, which are kinda stock and do see some overusage. Hitting the attack button to quickly move across a level will leave the sound played pinballing in your head for the remainder of the time when playing Munchables, but they are contrasted by the music and the fact that when you do eat a Tabemon, you hear its screams of pain as it's being digested.
Great. I made there feel like someone's platforms make me realize how many countless living creatures I've consumed.
All in all, the Munchables lands the niche of the Wii, playing to the strengths of stylization to stand against what could be considered, and excuse me Minimi for borrowing this, graphically impressive at the time. The Munchables is a 3D action platformer with the main goal of each level typically changing from stage to stage, but what stays consistent is eating any Tabemon that gets in your way. Difficulty is set to the lowest setting, and this might be the easiest game I've played for the channel where you can still die next to Detroit. Seriously, with my pathetically smooth brain, I didn't once experience a death, so that means unless you are a tiny child, this game shouldn't give you any trouble. Before I go into what you can do, I'm going to tackle level structure as each world follows a specific 3-part layout. The first section of a world is what I call the gimmick round. Usually you either have to reach a certain location for the stage to end, eat a specific set of enemies or objects, or other objectives of the like. These gimmicks always change per level, so while in World 4 the opening stage has you make it to the end of a specific area, World 3's first area has you eat 100 of a certain enemy type. Side note, after World 2, you can play the worlds technically out of order as after 2, 3, and 4 open, but there isn't any considerable leap in challenge if you do decide to fail at counting. Area 2 of a world is the mini-boss round. This is the same for all the levels. You have to get big enough to eat the mini-boss lingering around the stage, and once you achieve that goal, the level is over. Now, sometimes the second stage might be a big arena, other times it's a straight A to B affair. It really depends. The last area of a world is always the boss round, except for the final world, which has Area 2 be the boss rush before the final boss. Since I'm talking about enemies now, I'll go over the mechanics and what a Munchable can do. For starters, the Munchables has light RPG mechanics in that both you and Tabemon have levels. Think of this as a gauge for how powerful you are compared to select Tabemon, as you can't eat anyone that has a higher level than you. To get around this, eating a Tabemon fills up the stomach gauge, grants you 1 meal to your meal counter, and begins a combo. The more Tabemon you eat in the combo window, the more extra meals you get when it ends, and the quicker you level up and fill up the stomach gauge to evolve to a bigger state. Like with Katamari, your Munchable grows as it goes through a level to distinguish it from other Tabemon. The stomach gauge itself plays into the end level ranking and really doesn't denote power like your level does, with each section in a world having a maximum level. Eating Tabemon is as easy as pressing the A button, as you can play Munchables with a GameCube controller, but if you hold it down, you can charge up a dash move that allows you to eat multiple Tabemon in one gulp. This is more useful when there are a lot of smaller Tabemon to feast on, as attempting to eat a bigger one will have you bounce off of it, rendering the lot of you in recoil. However, if all you have are larger Tabemon, you can break them down to smaller portions with the attacks so that you can munch on them. Take note that sometimes you might have to use 2 attacks to split a bigger Tabemon into sizable samples depending on what its level is. Attacks are a good way of initiating combos, but once you are big enough, attacks won't break apart a Tabemon and will instead stun it. Now, the various fruits and vegetables you indulge in aren't wholly defenseless, as they are capable of damaging you, but this is level dependent, as at a higher level, you have an unnerving presence that makes most Tabemon unwilling to attack you. Many bosses and bosses will still take a swing at you even if you are close enough in level, but once you match a boss's, as in the Area 3 encounters level, they will run away in terror. That said, getting hit puts you into a damaged state where another attack will finish you off if you don't mash the jump button. You also lose meals and stomach gauge, which can make getting S rank nigh impossible. To help you in your consumption of Tabemon, there exist power-ups that either allow you to stun Tabemon in an area, eat them real quickly, or break them apart faster. All are kinda let down for a few reasons. Now, most of the time when you go through a stage, Tabemon will already be walking about, but sometimes they do spawn in to create pseudo-arenas. Likewise, Tabemon aren't the only things that can show up, as wind-up bombs can sometimes make an appearance. No matter what, don't eat them, you'll take damage. Also, don't attack them either if they are bigger than you, as they'll split into more bombs. While I've already covered level structure, each section of a world has a collectible in the form of the acorns. 10, 20, and 5 are in each area respectively, with collecting all in a section awarding you a cosmetic item you can equip on the overworld via going to the Elder's house, which has the enemy dictionary and a few other extras. This is also how you change characters. At the end of every section, you get taken to the rating screen where your performance is rated from, I don't know what the lowest rank is, to S. For easy S ranks, you have to fill the stomach gauge to maximum, which also means you're probably at max level for the section as well. What you get for getting S ranks is a pat on the back? I don't know what you get for acquiring all S ranks, but I didn't feel the need to replay the levels to see what you got. Bosses are odd affairs in that there is a strategy for most, but outside of 2, you can freely wail on them. What you're supposed to do is strike the legendary orb powering the boss to break it apart faster, or in the case of the grapes, chocolate bar and onigiri, reflect their projectiles with an attack, or knock them into lava. But all non-projectile bosses are subject to attack since they're just bigger Tabemon. Defeating a boss always gifts you a free cosmetic, and in the early half unlocks the next world, but once you unlock 2 worlds at once, you will need to defeat 2 to open up the next 2. Upon finishing the game, you unlock Robo, as well as the Mirror Worlds for extended playtime. While I've never played Katamari Damacy, sorry all those in the peanut gallery have just disappointed, Munchables and tangentially Da Blob has this almost soothing quality to it. It's a game you play to relax and unwind, as there aren't a lot of threats you have to deal with, there is an overabundance of saccharine delight, and the vibes it sends are overtly cozy. Now, I know this isn't exactly something I can quantify easily, as this is more based on personality, but sometimes when I play a game, I just want to veg out and not put my brain to heavy use. I believe the term switch your brain off is apt here, but not in the negative connotations that it usually brings, like when watching films. To facilitate my kinda poorly worded point, as this is more emotional than analytical, the Munchables has solid design. Quickly eating up a bunch of Tabemon in a short span of time is one of my favorite factors of the game, especially since you can either go about it lethargically by mashing the A button near any Tabemon, or in a somewhat strategic way by spacing out Tabemon and using the charge chomp to quickly rack up on combos, meals, and levels. The Tabemon are amusing in all regards, and because there are so many of them, you can kinda get caught off guard by what you might encounter next. I've only scratched the surface with what I laid out earlier, as I haven't even mentioned the cabbage birds, the franken-zucchini, the tuxedo bananas, or the dancing carpet-riding cucumbers. There's a reason for why the game has an encyclopedia for all the Tabemon, and some only show up in rarer occasions as you won't see all in your first playthrough. The levels themselves are just as colorful as the various Tabemon, with my favorite three being the Haunted Mansion, the Candy Factory, and the Split Volcano. While the gimmick and mini-boss stages of the Haunted Mansion aren't too crazy, the enemies are cheeky nods to horror movie icons, both old and new. Jason Voorhees' apple is so cheesy, but I love it all the same. The Candy Factory is one of my favorite music tracks of the game, and the scale of the stages is at its peak, climbing up and down the conveyor belts of the factory. It also has the most interesting level hazards, being that it has the fans, heat rays, and the crushers, as no other stage really has active level hazards. Passive, sure, lava and bottomless pits, but not something you have to actively avoid as you platform and eat whatever is in your way. While Split Volcano's first section is a reverse of the beach's second section, Area 2 is a race against the rising lava that pairs well with the core gameplay. Eating Tabemon fast was already the goal, so adding a swerve to that provides a neat little twist, as now you can't dilly-dally, both in leveling up as well as collecting the acorns. The final boss is fun in its own right, as it tries something different from the rest by being a two-stage fight focusing on color matching. That, and you can eat the worlds that you have to draw power on when you get big enough, leading to the planet of starving, having no worlds left. As I've already said earlier in the presentation, the music, as per a Namco Bandai staple, is wonderful, easily matching the likes of some of their better OSTs. I can't oversell this enough. If you have a fondness for Splatoon's soundtrack, which I do, this one will be right up your alley. While I don't find a lot wrong with the Munchables, there are a few weak points in the game's armor. Bosses are pretty uninspired in that there are only three styles you have to deal with: pushback, dead man's volley, and sumo. There is no deviation from this rigidity except for the final boss, which is a tad lame. Broccoli is exactly like Mushroom Thriller, Big Fishy is hella Cantaloupe in the Onigiri, and the grapes in King Choco are the same. While you could make the argument that all the Tabemon fall into this blandness, as Super Carrot is exactly like all the rest of the characters, there isn't a sense of scale with the regular Tabemon to call attention to this. And because there are so many in a level as opposed to a singular boss, you're more inclined to think about how you can get a big combo with what you have to deal with as opposed to whittling down the same boss over and over. Again, outside of Grapes and King, you can freely attack a boss to break them down so all of them feel a bit samey. The power-ups feel like a wasted opportunity as well, doubly so since most are time wasters or actively detrimental to you. Jet and Vacuum only work when there are a bunch of smaller Tabemon to gobble, which a charged gulp can fulfill, and because you are constantly moving during Jet's duration, you either careen off towards somewhere you didn't want to or accidentally swallow a bomb, which is Vacuum's problem as you are constantly eating. Both are surplus to charge while weight is useless. Outside of one instance, knocking down some flying Tabemon, stunning a group of enemies in an area is not needed. I would much rather send them down my gullet than put them in the no-no corner. Star I can at least see some usage, as a few times you are given it to deal with much larger Tabemon, but it shows up few and far between that when it does, it's like Jet. Onto level specifics, 3-1's Fish Hunt is boring at the best of times, solely because the area is too big and you will need to double back to swallow the bigger fish down. It is mind-numbing tedium, not help that to get S rank, you have to dance carefully around the abundance of bombs. They are the worst enemy in the game by a mile, mostly because your only option in dealing with them carefully is to nudge them to activate their attack. If they didn't break apart when you're smaller than them, I wouldn't hate them so much, but that isn't the case. The Munchables is an enjoyable experience that doesn't overstay its welcome. Its simple controls mixed with a shorter runtime and adorable enemy roster would definitely suffer if the game was longer, but thankfully it isn't, earning the Munchables a little niche for it to stake its claim as a hidden gem on the Wii. Since the white monolith is no longer in production, boot up Dolphin if you aren't into collecting. That number keeps on ticking, I tell you what. At the rate this is going, I might reach 1,000 subscribers, and at that point, I have a somewhat special video for the lot of you to keep you somewhat guessing. It will be in the same vein as the Saya video, but perhaps longer, as I will have a lot of ground to cover both in a historical and narrative sense. And a gameplay one as well, but I don't want to spoil too much, despite those in the inner circle already knowing my plans. I will say, though, that I've made past references to it beforehand, but that's all the hints you'll get from me. Well, not really, as I have one more hint to give before this video is over. This showing of the Munchables is over, but stay tuned for our next feature involving mass hysteria, violence to and by cops, and a forgotten sequel.